From Alberta's government taking the lead on a pipeline proposal and the response it's generating, to where our province now ranks on the minimum wage list. It is time to hear from tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Jim Groom, political scientist, recently retired from Medicine Hat College, and Don Hill, co-founder of the blog Beyond Polarity, longtime broadcast journalist in Alberta. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the Premier setting a tone on Alberta's push for a pipeline.
This is a test of whether Canada works as a country. Because if we can't build with collaboration of the federal government and between provinces, if it's everybody gets to get their products going to market except Alberta, that's not a country.
Danielle Smith Wednesday on announcing the Alberta government will lead the process in creating an application for a 1 million barrel a day bitumen pipeline to the coast of Northwest BC, committing $14 million so far to the effort. But gentlemen, before we get to some of the response that's coming out of BC, let's talk about this proposal first and foremost. How much, Jim, has the Premier raised the stakes in making this announcement of fronting the project?
Well, I think she's trying to make the imperative that the federal government has to come across with the previous demands that she made, getting rid of the tanker ban and the cap on bitumen, et cetera, the pollution cap. And so she's really done rather a good job politically, I think, kind of strategic, that she can always say that if this doesn't succeed, it was because the federal government put in roadblocks. And that works really well with her base, of course. And she can run on the next election based on, we tried, we gave it our best shot, but the federal government wouldn't help. If the federal government does capitulate and make the changes that they've sort of prevented till now, there is really no chance that this pipeline is going to be active within any more than 7 to 10 years, as all the experts have said. So it's something the pie in the sky. And the last time Northern Gateway was objected to by the Federal Court of Appeal because there was a lack of consultation with the First Nations and the Indigenous communities along the coast, who have already said they oppose having another pipeline across. So it's one of those political moves that I think is sort of astute. It also brings to the fact that we're not talking about the teachers' strike right now. So it's kind of been timely for changing the channel and distracting the voters of Alberta.
Okay, so Don, let's maybe pick up right on that point there. What is at stake for Danielle Smith here politically? Is there anything to be made of the timing of this announcement?
I'm going to completely concur with Jim there in terms of distraction is very useful when you don't want to attract attention to something that is a political football at this point. But I wrote a few notes over the last couple of days and just trying to do what just a few moments ago Richard did a spectacular job explaining, as I mentioned, to the great unwashed and the slightly showered, those of us in media, about what's really going on underneath the hood. So it gets down to this, gentlemen. It really gets down to politics, policy, and process. And unfortunately, the Premier hasn't got any of the balls in the air at this point. As you mentioned, this teacher strike, as we just heard a few moments ago from an expert, Richard, that this is a no-go from the get-go because there's nobody signing on the policy part, let alone the process, meaning the partners in this particular adventure. And then, of course, there's a whole situation ahead whereby do we even know if we have a country? And this is what the Premier is hinting at. Now, I'm going to add one more thing, and I don't mean to digress, so to speak, but I guess I am. Is we have to understand that in the United States of America right now, the world as we understood it, not just for energy, but just everything, is literally up in the air. And we're not quite sure where it's all going to land. So if the Premier is saying, if we don't have a country, if we don't do this, I don't know what that actually means in process, but I guess we're going to find out soon enough.
Well, and now, it's not all smooth sailing in driving this proposal forward. Here's some of what BC's Premier has had to say in response to Alberta's announcement on Wednesday.
It's words.
I am being polite. There is no project. There is no bridge to cross unless The Albertan government and the federal Canadian government are committing billions of taxpayer dollars to build this project.
And the BC Premier, not alone, in raising a red flag, Coastal First Nations, saying they oppose lifting the tanker ban and claiming as well there has been no consultation to this point. Now, Don, what do you see building here where conflict with BC is concerned?
Well, you know, again, the situation in British Columbia right now is that they're at odds with one another. The Conservatives, if we can call it for what it is, were in danger of being elected. And so Mr. Eby has to play to his base, and that's what he's doing. But I want to go back and speak to the obvious here, is industry has made it very, very clear that they don't trust politics. They don't trust the policy that comes out of that politics, and they certainly don't want to be part of the process, given that, as Richard said in the previous part of the program, that there's a company that burned through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars with nothing to show for it. So this is all political smoke and mirrors at this point, and I have no idea what it's going to look like next week, let alone what's going to look like 10 years from now.
Jim, how much does this shift the political fight away from Ottawa? Give the Alberta government a new or different foe.
Oh, absolutely. You know, they can fight on two fronts at the same time. I'm not sure that's what they want, but because they're ideologically different in the provinces and as well as the federal government, it gives them an opportunity to once again play to the base and say, you see, these anti-Albertans are preventing us from expanding, preventing us from getting our fair share of the market for oil and gas and becoming a superpower, an energy superpower, and it's because of these two levels of government. And you know, this plays into the hands of the independent movement within the UCP, and it really is one of the most pressing concerns for Danielle Smith. Isn't being elected in 2 years so much, because she's got that time frame. It's to keep the party together so that they don't lose that 30% that want to separate from Canada, and she's got to be concerned with that more. So she has to appease that base, as she's done on everything from the Alberta Next gatherings to all the different policies that have been put forward that have been rejected by the average Albertan, but seems to be in demand by that fringe element within the UCP.
And Don, maybe as a final question, if it is that this project lands on the federal government's list of projects, regulatory hurdles are cleared, how much do you see Alberta working with BC to get the government there to come around? Or does this then fall on the federal government to clear a path?
You know, this is such a mess that we find ourselves in, talking about old ideas and not having any new solutions to this. I wish I had an easy answer on this one, but I think as long as the politics are what they are, everyone is going to be sort of squabbling over this, that, and the other thing. I think the other question that comes up in mind is what's happening to the south of us in the United States. Now, pipelines are interesting in the sense that they can not just transport oil, but it can also transport water. And I think if anyone is looking at this carefully, one of the things that our friends to the United States, to the south of us, really require, perhaps more than oil, is going to be water. And if the federal government can't wrap its head around this or this, that, and the other thing, then yeah, you're right. Jim is talking about it. It does play to the base at 30% now, and I guess it's growing one way or the other, that may want to pull the plug on some certain things, and we're really going to be in uncertain territory. So that's a long-winded answer to a short question, but we're in uncertain territory when it comes to relations, not just between provinces, but with the federal government.
In terms of certain territory, I know we do need to go to a break, but when we come back, the Premier's defense of Alberta's minimum wage. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. As of October 1st, Alberta has the lowest minimum wage in the country. And while the opposition is calling on the government to raise it so Albertans can cope with higher costs, the Premier says raising it now would be bad for young workers.
We've also got the highest youth unemployment rate. And when the NDP increased the minimum wage from $10 to $15, we saw mass layoffs of young people, and in particular in rural Alberta. So until we can make some progress on reducing youth unemployment, we have to make sure that the wage rate is not going to be a deterrent to that.
Statistics Canada data shows prices have risen about 20% in Alberta since the last minimum wage hike to the current rate of $15 an hour. On October 1st, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, and PEI all implemented increases. Jim, Alberta's minimum wage hasn't changed since 2018. What is to be made of this standing now of being the lowest rate in the country? What does it say about Alberta?
I think it's really emblematic of where the government is putting their priorities. You know, if we look at the people making minimum wage, these are on the low end of the totem pole, you might say. They really aren't luxurious situations that they're living in. If we look at the cutback, the clawback on AISH recipients, the $200, you know, because of the AISH people were making too much money, I guess. These supported living conditions and the increase in rent in that case as well. All these are sort of symbolic of where the government wants to save, and where they're not willing to cut from the top. It's just another symbolic aspect of the haves and the have-nots. If you look at the unreasonable position they're taking with the teachers, teachers haven't had a raise for seems like forever. 5% over the last 10 years, and they're not making unreasonable demands, and they'd rather have them go on strike and rather pay families $150 a week for their children rather than to pony up and say education is one of the most crucial aspects of for our youth. It's where our future lies, and we need to pay the teachers what they're worth.
Don, in terms of perceptions, how does the Premier's defense of holding firm at $15 an hour play when Conservative governments in provinces like Ontario and Saskatchewan don't seem to have an issue with raising their minimum wages?
The key word that you used is conservative, and I'm going to throw an octopus out on the arena floor right now. This is libertarian to my way of thinking and what I'm seeing going on here. You mentioned, Jim, and thanks for bringing that up with regards to the teachers, even though we're talking about minimum wage. Perfectly reasonable. You're absolutely correct. But if you want people to go on strike, this is what you do. Let's not forget that Alberta has the only constituency in the country that has charter schools that are publicly supported. And in terms of ideology, and you consider what I just said a few moments ago, and you put that as a lens through what this government may or may not be doing, everything starts to make a little bit more sense, in the sense that teachers, yeah, you're on strike, good. Parents, why don't you get together and put together, you know, whatever it is that you're going to put together for a charter school? I'm just saying that. I'm not saying that that's what's happening. Let's get down to the minimum wage thing. I think what could happen is some remarkable math, in the sense that we're the only province that has just the GST, 5%. Okay. So maybe you can add 10% tax relief or something. I have no idea what I'm talking about. It's just that we're in uncertain territory again, and you can make stuff up. So in other words, if business owners are saying, you know, we can't afford this jump on the minimum wage, well, if you get a tax regime that says, well, you don't have to pay taxes on that. Matter of fact, we'll give that money to the kids if that's what we're going to do. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about, but then again, I'm not sure anybody does really understand what is actually going on underneath the hood again.
Yeah, Jim, another person who's talking about this, Gil McGowan, he's president of the Alberta Federation of Labour. He calls this a wage suppression strategy, and his organization launching a campaign urging the government to bump the minimum to $20 an hour to make life more affordable. Where do you see debate over this minimum wage direction heading? We're just, you know, a couple of weeks away from the start of the fall sitting.
Yeah, I think the NDP should be getting this in their teeth a little bit and running with it, because it does impact on a lot of folks. In fact, Medicine has one of the highest rates of minimum wage earners in the entire province. And it's important for folks that are on that minimum wage train, if you like, to improve their conditions a little bit. Working 2 and 3 jobs in order to make a living is not really what we should have in this province. We should be a have province, and we should recognize it as such.
All right, gentlemen, we are clear out of time. Have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
Michael. Good to see you again, Jim. Bye-bye.